This is a short presentation for the Plan, Do, Study, Act model created as part of CSTE's data science team training. This presentation is created by me, Cody L. Custis, of Suro Consulting, and is publicly available on YouTube. Any opinions expressed are those of the author and not those of CSTE, the CDC, or Bitterroot Health. Any examples are broad and contain no business/patient information. All mistakes are those of the author. We'll introduce the steps for Plan, Do, Study, Act, sometimes known as Plan, Do, Check Act. We'll use one example from healthcare. The Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle has 4 stages. Plan, determine goals for a process and needed changes to achieve them. Do, implement the changes. Study, evaluate the results in terms of performance. Act, standardize and stabilize the change or begin the cycle again depending on the results. That comes from the Lean Institute. Here, we see some formal tools, such as a formal project plan, timelines, or Gantt chart. It's also possible to use very informal tools. Personally, I find myself often doing documentation by PowerPoint. What I'm trying to do is capture the key parts of the process. A tool like PowerPoint works well as it naturally sets it for bullet points and sections, whereas a document will encourage users to be verbose. There are 3 parts to any project: input, process, and output. When it comes to documentation, it's usually best to start by planning the output. What will the project look like in the end? This is important to get managers to look at what the goal of the project is and allow the people who will do to suggest the process. For example, I recently went to the auto shop to have the oil changed on my Honda Accord. I know what I want the output to be. I also know that my Honda is an input. I'm not going to start suggesting to the mechanic how to change oil. Project documentation and plans too often get caught by focusing on what the process should be rather than focusing on what the goal is. In some cases, the inputs are documented before the outputs. This can be necessary, for example, if there is an unfamiliar set of inputs, but a general agreement about outputs. For example, a public health department may want a social determinants of health dashboard. In this case, it's worthwhile to research and document what existing data is available, both project-specific and broad, before doing detailed design of the output. The process comes last because the people who do usually know the most about how to make a project happen. A geographic information systems project might involve doing geocoding and summarizing data. That is best left to a data engineer/analyst. Now we have the advice from Yoda. Do or do not. There is no try. The do part is doing what is planned. It's important the people who do have an opportunity to finish the work to the agreed scope in the project plan or offer feedback. Also, timelines are important for developing a reasonable quality of work. If a project engineer is given a month to work on part of a project, the expectation is the project will be around the quality expected in a month. If all features would have taken a year, those would be impossible to implement. Timelines help make business decisions as to how good a process should be before launching. Also note the importance of documentation. Documenting how a project is done makes it replicable and alterable. Studies to determine what worked and what didn't. Ideally, metrics are created as part of the project plan. Outcome metrics are things that are not directly controlled as part of the project. Process metrics are controlled. Here we see some examples of both outcome and process metrics. We can improve a process both in terms of outcomes and efficiency. A new advertising campaign might decrease teenage pregnancy. We may want to evaluate if it is well targeted to efficiently reach appropriate customers. For example, were the ads targeted to teenagers, or did a lot of non-teenagers see the advertisements? Within a process, there may be opportunities to improve. So we have 2 forms where we're looking at both those outcomes and seeing, can we get better outcome, but also that process. How much time did it take? For example, we used 3 programs to convert the data sets, or we spent 20 hours gathering data sets. Could we do that in 10? Act involves updating the process with the suggested changes. When acting, it is best to make changes one by one or in independent areas of a process. Multiple changes simultaneously often lead to process breakdown. For example, a new data source might be more relevant. That should be changed before changing software used in a process. So for ACT, there are two types of analysis. Wide analysis is where many approaches are taken, but minimal steps are done with each. Consider paint samples, where one gets a little square of each color and chooses the appropriate color. Deep analysis involves choosing the appropriate path and going down it. The problem is that some managers will act by both doing wide and deep analysis at the same time, and that results in a cross-product of many, many steps. If you think that there are 5 approaches you can take, and there are 10 steps to each approach, well, you multiply those and you get 50 steps. That's a lot of steps. One might look at tick-borne illnesses. One metric might be examining rates by county, another would be examining rates by age across the state. Looking at both at the same time is usually not useful. We're going to talk about an example that comes from working in healthcare administration, looking at our charge master. Note that any numbers here are entirely fictitious and examples are simplified. So the charge master is a listing of line items for every service that a facility performs. These are billing codes based both on the service and where the service is performed. Hospitals update the charge master annually. It will be updated for fiscal year 2024, which ends June 30th, 2024. The charges depend both on the service performed and where in the facility the service is performed. For example, an office visit has different charges depending on if it is done at the main facility or at a rural health clinic. These are publicly available facts. We can't just charge for services randomly. We need to justify charges based on changing costs. That sets up constraints and assumptions for developing the charge master. Some services at the line item already have charges assigned for fiscal year 2024. Projected total revenue, that's the quantity of a service done multiplied by the price, added up for all the different services a facility does for fiscal year 2024, has to meet a target value. We are also constrained in how we change prices based on market rates. We cannot increase prices if charges are above market. We can increase if charges are below market. So as you can see, we've documented our output. The actual charge master is one file containing line item charges for every service subject to constraints. We have the charge data for fiscal year 2023, where we can look at all the charges we've done with line item services for price and quantity. That tells us revenue in fiscal year 2023. We have a suggested charges file. There's a key input that we're missing. When I came into the project, we didn't have a charge master for fiscal year 2023. Well, that's not entirely true. We had the charge master file, but it was not in a useful format. It had columns that should be rows, and rows that should be columns. So the major thing that needs to be done is create a useful charge master file. And here we're documenting the process for Plan, Do, Study, Act. We look at our input, the ugly charge master file. Our process, we're going to do data wrangling on it. We're going to document how we wrangle that data. And our output is going to be a useful charge master file that we can work with. So we put this together as a Plan, Do, Study, Act. See the planning steps, doing steps, studying steps, and action. And note that the parts in italic already came in before as part of the project. By using a Plan, Do, Study, Act model, we can come in and document what needs to be done and how those actions are to be done. Taking the time to document the process is key for being able to study the best ways to improve the process. We know that we will revisit this next year. We want to be able to efficiently create the charge master file and model revenue when the cycle comes around in May of calendar year 2024. So our plan, we have our files for input, our output is our charge master file. We also have revenue projections, which is a model that we create. Our do is going to be data wrangling and the actual creation of the model. Study, we want to see how the file is transformed, what steps we took. We want to work with our vendor to kind of improve the pieces that go into that. And act is using that documentation to build the model and do the data wrangling more efficiently. Thank you very much.